Music theory. Why Microsoft Excel is the best guitar fretboard and music theory tool ever. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably saying, hey, look, if I was to randomly ask 100 professional guitar player instructors at some university or another, how many of them are likely to agree with me that Microsoft Excel is the best music theory tool ever? Most likely 0 of them, but they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about, and I'm going to explain why Microsoft Excel is the best music theory tool ever. And I'm not just saying for the guitar, although it is particularly good for the guitar. In other words, if you're going to music theory school, in particular to learn the guitar, Microsoft Excel should be a mandatory course that you are taking. If it's not, I would recommend supplementing your education. We have some supplemental materials right here because we'll be working with Microsoft Excel. But if you're not playing on the guitar, it's still going to be a very useful tool because you will note in music theory we have a lot of charts and graphs comparing different scales, comparing different intervals, shifting from different scale keys to scale keys, chords to chords. All of that is as transparent as can be in Microsoft Excel. Now, note some people are going to say, well, Microsoft Excel, that's not high-tech enough. We're going to music school here. This is the modern era. We've got way cooler software than just an electronic spreadsheet like Microsoft Excel. We've got database programs. And I note that I am an accountant. I'm partial to Microsoft Excel, but I have also run into the same argument with database programs when working with things like QuickBooks and other database programs, which are great. I use them all the time. But when teaching accounting, those programs are not always ideal. Why? Because they're designed to give an input, and then the input's going to give a particular type of output. You don't see what's actually happening. You don't see the connection. It goes into a black box and magically shows you, quote, the answer, end quote. What we don't want oftentimes when learning a system is simply the answer. We want to see the connections. So you can think of that as basically a 2D kind of worksheet like a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, which can then be turned into you can think of like a 3D thing that's going to have that black box, that conversion of a database system. Similarly with music theory, I want to be able to map out. I want to be able to see side by side one scale versus another scale, one chord versus another chord. I want to be able to look at the connections, the differences between the two, manipulate the cells, all of that perfectly done in Excel. All right, so let's get into it, noting that we have a grid or fretboard format. So with the guitar in particular, Excel is great. Why? Because the fretboard is, of course, a spreadsheet type of format. Now, I'm going to get into kind of why basically there might be some aversions to using Excel. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm an accountant. So you can claim that maybe that I just like Excel because that's what I know. That's a valid argument. But I really believe that looking at it objectively, Excel is an excellent tool, in particular for the guitar. And I think some people just, they kind of don't want to think that math is or music is so logical. It's so symmetrical, that you can map it out on a grid, on an Excel worksheet, because that kind of maybe takes the magic out of it a little bit or something. But it is all perfectly logical and comparable and can be analyzed like a spreadsheet, like debits and credits, basically. That's the way it's all ratios, But in any case, notice that when we look at the guitar, when we're playing the guitar, it's facing this way. So we've been arguing in prior presentations that we would like to represent our video presentations as though we're playing left-handed, so that when we're playing, it's on the same side as our body as the video presentations. Similarly, we argued with our worksheets, which we're going to mainly be building in Excel, I would like to have the low or heavy E string on top. Noting that's not exactly how it would be if you were to look at the guitar physically, because if I was to look at the guitar this way, notice it would be flipped around. The neck of the guitar would be flipped the other way. If I flip the neck around, normally the heavy string would not be on top. It would be the high or the high E string in pitch. So what we've done here is we took the mirror image of the guitar, so the heavy E string is on top, and that would be as though we took this guitar and just imprinted the strings, just put the strings on the screen. So that's what we have here. So I would like to mirror this format in a worksheet similar to this one up top, which is mirroring the fretboard. And notice how well that works. It maps out like 1-to-1. Here are the frets, and then basically the different strings, and then here are the lines and the boxes. It's just perfect match to line things up. I don't think there's any better software out there. You got cool software where you can see the strings and this and that. That might be some aesthetically better to some degree, but if you're trying to map things out and you want to put something in the boxes, such as the note names, or such as the mode names, or the interval relationships, and color code the boxes and all that kind of stuff, nothing is better than a spreadsheet. All right, Excel's natural grid format mirrors the structure of the guitar fretboard. So again, a lot of people they just don't like to think that it's a spreadsheet that your fingers are on. They don't want to touch a spreadsheet. That's like real work. But dude, it's a spreadsheet. So rows equal strings and columns equal frets, allowing for 1-to-1 mapping of notes to a location. So easily maps on perfectly, 1-to-1 relationship. No need for custom software. The fretboard is already a spreadsheet. So you might think you can do better. We can come up with, some programmer can come up with some better thing, but it's not better, because as soon as you put it into a database, you hide what is happening, whereas the Excel sheet does not. It's all transparent, like the government should be, but it's not, right? The government's in a database program. It's all hidden when it should be transparent in an Excel worksheet. I don't know where that comparison came from. Sorry about that. Anyways, dynamic logic for theory. Excel formulas allow you to transpose keys instantly, highlight scales and chords using conditional formatting. So note that a lot of people don't have as much experience in, say, formulas in Excel. So if you're learning Excel and if I've convinced you that having tables in Excel is useful, which I think is just really clear, then the first thing you want to learn is to be able to set up a table properly, to be able to set up what do you want your rows and columns to be? How is it going to be lined up? That actually takes some time, but if you work on it for a while, you get that down, and then you can work on more complex formulas and whatnot that you can put into the system, and using other tools such as color coding, which can be really easy, just highlighting and changing the color, but also using conditional formatting, basically coloring the entire fretboard, for example, or your representation of it, using a logical formula or conditional formatting, such as here, where we highlighted the 1, 3, 5 relative positions to the key of C major. So that's what we did, right? Yeah. So that would be, so that is really useful. So in our course, we're going to go over the stuff just verbally, but we'll also, when we do our work, when we actually put it down, we'll do it in Excel. And a lot of musicians are actual tactile learners. They learn by playing the guitar, and so that means Excel is also a tactile thing. So if you like tinkering with the guitar, I would think that once you start tinkering with Excel, you might actually enjoy that if you're not already enjoying that. So build modes from any root with simple logic. So you can build modes, because the modes are a relationship. So you can easily then look at the relationships. You want to analyze the relationships between the different modes, which are different scales in the same diatonic, the same set of notes. Then it's easiest to play around with that if you can manipulate an Excel sheet. Calculate interval distances and note relationships. So if you start working in Excel, it'll become more and more clear why some of the suggestions we've already put out make sense, such as having a numbering system for the notes, some kind of numbering system, right? 12 notes should have numbers. Why? Because obviously in something like Excel, as well as in your mind, it's a lot easier to count up, count back, and take distances, subtraction between numbers, right? And the same is true with the intervals. So that's going to become more. So, and the basic idea is, if it's easier in a spreadsheet to see something that's in a table format, if it's easier to do something in something like an Excel, then it's most likely because that is the easiest format to put it in. Meaning it's most likely because the way you're looking at it with letters and no numbers is more difficult. If the logic is simpler in Excel, it's most likely because it is simpler done a different way. It leads you to the logical conclusion that you might want to do something a little bit differently. You might want to add numbers to the notes, for example. So we can also pattern recognition, visual color coding, so we can have the tonic, the intervals, the modes as we saw before here. Makes it easier to see chord shapes. So if I highlight the 1, 3, 5 as we did here, we can see this would be the 1, 3, 5. That would be one way that we can play the chord. We can look at the shapes as we move up and down the guitar, easily mapping out our caged shapes, our open chords, how we can make those chords basically movable. We have the internal modal relationships can be mapped out, recognize consistent scale patterns across the neck. So this will lead us to question some of the things that we've talked about, right? Which is going to be, for example, this idea of a modal node-based centered system leads us to question the idea of, well, if I go from the 1, 4, 5 in the key of C, although I can see it as a major chord, a C, a major on the 1, a major to the 4, a major to the 5, the pattern around it will be different on the fretboard. It's going to fit into a different master pattern on the fretboard, which leads us to start to think, well, maybe I should be seeing it as fitting into the shape that is the Ionian or major shape versus the Lydian shape versus the Mixolydian shape, because although they're the same 3 notes, there's a different pattern around them if I want to be in the same master diatonic shape. These things you don't pick up unless you analyze the fretboard being easiest to analyze when you have the top or heavy E string on top and mapped out in Excel so that you can use things like color coding to compare things. So we will practice that as we go into our work problem portions. So custom practice tools, you can build interactive fretboard maps like this one here, auto-generated interval drills to help practice the intervals, chord construction visualization. So obviously we can start map out the chords so that we can easily see where our fingers will go in a very transparent way. Real-time analysis of voicings and our arpeggios. So any of the shapes that we're looking at, because obviously as guitar players, as well as any other kind of instrument, but in particular the guitar, the shapes are something that we really want to implement. It's not the only thing, but it's a huge thing that we want to be able to visualize. And again, the Excel, that's how you visualize it. That's how you do it. If you're not doing it that way, you're doing it wrong. So these are impossible to do easily on static PDF fretboards or even mini apps. So a lot of people have pretty cool like interactive PDFs. I've seen a lot of different things that people are doing that have been pretty creative things. However, all of the fancy stuff out there, people are trying to get attention with their cool new tool and how it's going to map out the fretboard and whatnot. I don't think any of them will get you there faster than Excel. I really don't. Although there's some cool stuff out there, but for just mapping out the fretboard, I haven't seen anything that's better. So universal, and it's shareable. So no special software or platform dependency. So clearly this is another issue that I just want to keep on hammering home, because I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate that if you were to go to, say, a school like a university for music, for example, the tools that are provided for the instructors are provided by large institutional resource providers. So that means they're going to want their tools to be used. So they might have some cool database stuff, and they might have some really neat stuff, but it's likely that they want you to use the stuff in part because they're basically selling or distributing the stuff from the publishers that they are working with. Whereas, so that means that if you're just doing stuff in Excel, right, they're going to say, well, how can you do it in Excel? The publishers aren't going to like that. Excel is free. You can try to lock the spreadsheet or something like that, but the database program is proprietary. So that's why there's some incentive to be able to say, hey, look, we've got this super cool database program. That's why you're here. We're not using just PDF files or Excel sheets, or if we are using PDF files, we've got the professors that have the super best PDF files because they're geniuses or something like that, when I think Excel is possibly the best tool in reality. So just, whenever you're looking at materials, keep in mind the incentives involved in the people presenting the materials. So anyone can open, edit, and share Excel files, perfect for collaboration and teaching. So clearly, the great thing about Excel, which we will do here if you're in some of our course materials, is provide you the Excel worksheets we're working on. So we will create very detailed Excel worksheets. I'm an accountant. I like Excel. I'm going to make very detailed Excel worksheets. Music theory is perfect for practicing Excel. It's great. And so if you just want to practice Excel, you might as well learn some music theory and do it, because it's a great tool to do it. But we'll build the worksheets if you want to do that, but we'll also provide you the worksheets. However, I would still think you'd want to watch through the building of them, possibly because even if you don't want to do the one-for-one construction of a complex worksheet, it's useful to see how the worksheet was built so that you can at least manipulate the worksheet, do things like color coding once it's been constructed. So work across operating systems and devices. So why nobody's doing it? So again, we come to this question once again. Why isn't anyone flipping their guitar around so it looks left-handed? It's because it's easier to do. Why isn't anybody putting the top string on top in their worksheets? Why isn't anybody doing a modal-based system? So what is happening? Why isn't anybody using Excel if it's the best thing ever? I'm going to come up with my best explanations. One might be that it's a business tool. So it's got basically this idea of, well, I'm going to work with Bill Gates's thing or something. That guy's the billionaire or something like that. Or I don't know. It seems like it's in the business suite. So if people if you're in a university, there's some tension oftentimes between the departments, right? You've got the English department, which are like, we are the real masters of knowledge because we know the classic literature, which is actually the secret key to everything. And then the science people are like, whatever, we know science because science is like how the world really works. And then the music people are like, dude, you guys are all lame because we're aesthetically the place to be. And if the aesthetic people and the music are using the tools that the business people are using, then it's like they're not different, I think that might be part of the reason, right? It's got a business tent towards it, so people actually don't like the spreadsheet, even though it clearly maps onto the fretboard basically one-to-one, and even though a lot of the charts that are being constructed now being put in PDF files are built from either Excel or database programs, which is basically Excel on steroids. Anyways, musicians associate Excel with accounting and data. See, I'm an accountant and a musician. I try in both fields. But in any case, but I get it. So most musicians don't want to be known as accountants. I get that. But you got to get over it in some things, right? You got to accept that it's the best tool. Music schools and teachers haven't embraced the tool because it's not marketed for music. So again, if your job as a university is in part to get money from the government, from grants and whatnot, as a not-for-profit, and from donors, and to get money and to promote the publishers, then doing the work in like Excel isn't getting it done, right? The government and the donors are like, I could do Excel myself. And then the publishers are like, anybody can do Excel. You need to use our database program. See, but Excel works. So don't listen to them. Lack of vision or training. So most music educators aren't trained in spreadsheet logic. So obviously most people that are in the music department, even as an accountant, I'm of the generation where the digital spreadsheets really hadn't fully taken a hold even when I started in the field of accountant. There were still these big green sheets, which were terrifying to me because I had really bad handwriting. I need Excel. I need it. You don't understand. But it's even more the case, you would think, for music because, of course, most of the tablature in music, a lot of the information in it is not really designed for the types of writing in Excel, right? You might have certain characters and whatnot. That's what some of the database software does do well. It allows you to type these music characters that aren't normal kind of text in Excel. But again, the fact that they aren't normal texts in Excel possibly would lead us to the idea that maybe they're not the best thing that we should be using to represent certain things. So don't let that stop you. I'm just saying that's one of the reasons that might be the case. But again, the database program in Excel is easiest thing to map out tables. Excel can feel intimidating without knowing simple formulas. So sometimes if you haven't actually built tables a lot, then you might not be good at just doing that, just constructing what should be on the column versus the rows. However, even if you're in music and you think that you're not like a table building person, a lot of the music stuff is going to be in table format. It's like, obviously if you've looked at any of the scale charts, it's like overwhelming the way they have like, oh, here's 50 different scales you have to learn and whatnot. It's all mapped out in essence tables. Here's all the intervals comparing all the different modes. That's of course going to be in a table. So we're going to need to know the tables. You might as well be able to build the table, because when you can build the table, you can visualize the table and therefore read the table better. So legacy tools and mindset, why nobody's doing it? Because music education is still built on static notation, printed theory books, fixed diagrams, and memorization. So I guarantee you that a lot of, like if you're in a high-end like music school and for guitar, you're most likely going to be dealing with tools that you're going to say, hey, look, that's like antiquated. Right? You got PDF files. They're not even PDF files. They're printing things out on they might as well have sheepskin hides that they pulled out and they rolled the scroll out. I'm not looking at ancient literature that I'm like, should be so. But that's just how universities often are, because a lot of people are kind of, they're into what they've learned, and they're most likely into the history of it to some degree as well, and how they learned it is how you're going to learn it, and this tradition and so on and so forth. But if there's a better way, because technology has changed things, then my mind says we should do it the way that it's easiest to do. That's what I think. That's what I feel like. That's why I don't really get along. I'm not sure. I've had some problems in the educational area. I'll just point that out. But I still think that that's the case. So these tools don't leverage computation thinking and missed opportunities. So obviously, if you have a static piece of paper, you can do things with it, but you can't interact with it. And again, if you're a musician liking to interact with your tool, with your instrument, you will most likely like interacting once you get used to something else that you can tinker with, such as Excel. So why nobody is doing it? No industry push. So music tech companies don't profit from Excel. Obviously, again, you as an institution are promoting the tools of the publisher. You're basically a distributor of their stuff oftentimes, and they don't make any money because Excel is free. So that's so instead, not totally free, but it's universal. Instead, they push proprietary apps or tools that don't match Excel's flexibility. So they try to tell you this is better, but it's not. It's just that's proprietary, and Excel is not proprietary. It's for free. It's for everyone. It's universal. It's not really for free. I'm kind of going a little too far, but it's not like it's open source or anything. Don't get carried away. But you can possibly use similar techniques in like Google Sheets and stuff, whatnot. I'm just saying the spreadsheet. So the conclusion, a better way forward. Excel bridges the gap between spatial reasoning, how we play, and logical abstraction, how we think. It's free, pretty much, powerful, customizable, and uniquely suited to mastering the geometry of music. Now, when I keep on promoting Excel, you might be saying, hey, look, are you distributing Excel? No, I'm not distributing Excel. I'm not selling you Excel, okay? I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm telling you the way it is, man. The way it is. Obviously, I'm an accountant. I'm biased, so maybe there's that. But I'm not selling you anything except possibly my course. I do use Excel worksheets, but I'm not selling the software. Totally independent here on it. So take that into consideration.